I'm Bronwyn Morgan with Zio Air, and I am at AUVSI Xponential 2021 here in Atlanta. And it's so exciting to bring our podcast, ZioCast, live to AUVSI. We're talking to industry leaders across geospatial, drones, robotics, space, artificial intelligence, AI-based weather systems, and so much more, including advanced aerial mobility, UTM, government. It doesn't stop. So look forward to you joining us and listening to our leaders talk about what's happening with unmanned systems, drones, and more. Well, very excited to have with us today, and I'm excited for everybody that's with us today, Ray Adams. Ray is the Executive Director of the Urban Low Altitude Transport Association, or ULTRA, also the founding principal of Low Altitude Operations Solutions, and recently retired FAA Air Traffic Control. So this is going to be a really good interview as we talk about the airspace. Ray, welcome to ZioCast Live.
Bronwyn, thanks for having me. I love what you're doing.
Absolutely, and it's just so good to be connected here at Xponential. So with your 30 plus years of experience in ATC, in one of the most busy airspaces in the world, or the busiest out of New York, and now into your work in advanced aerial mobility, how does your background really kind of add value now to this conversation, do you see?
Yeah, that's a great question. Working in FAA and working in air traffic control for 30 plus years has given me a real sense of the realities and how the national airspace system operates and how the FAA itself operates and the thought processes and the risk management profiles, everything that the FAA uses to now make regulation. I got to see how all of the factors of the national airspace system kind of interact between the regulatory aspects of it, the human factors, and then the economics of the air transport industry, which all come together to kind of shape all of the policy and operations in the whole NAS. So I think that's going to bring a really great, we like to say practical, pragmatic, realistic perspective to an industry that's really now coming from the top down, from theory, and it's trying to find its footing in the deployment and the actual practice. So I think it's really going to be important, and we hope that we can bring that to the conversation.
I mean, this is the most, I think, important part of everything that we're doing. It is the airspace. And, deciding the safety matrix and how we stratify that. And, as we've been talking to some earlier guests, how does all that come together? And so, now that you're fully embedded with ULTRA and in the work, what are the current objectives of the organization in shaping the future of aerial transportation?
So, we're working closely with government and some organizations in the Northeast to try to build out the research and development activities that are happening. Northeast is an excellent place to work, New York, New Jersey especially, because of the differing population density profiles you can work in, the different types of environments. The airspace is very complex. So we're working in South Jersey with the National Aviation Research and Technology Park, and shout out to them, and Howard Kyle's doing a great job over there. They're attempting to build out a center for research and development where carriers, developers, technology developers can come down, bring their wares, test them all out down in South Jersey, and then ULTRA's view is that if you can test all these out in, let's call it the lower density Northeast, you can bring it up 90 or 100 miles to the north to the Class Bravo airspace around New York City, and we can find a proving ground for those technologies there.
Wow, this is, I think, if we do it there, well, we can do it anywhere.
That's what we say.
And what do you see as the phases of integration from manned to autonomous advanced aerial mobility? Because I think I've talked to some companies that will probably start with a single pilot in some instances where they feel that it's maybe better from public acceptance, but we know we're moving to a fully automated environment up there.
At some point we will. I think there's a lot of hurdles right now. I see SUAS as being the initial deployment of some autonomy, just because of the lower risk factors, the weights. They're not carrying passengers. We can use technologies like RID and such to enable an autonomous system. I think once you transition to a passenger carrying environment, or you have larger aircraft that pose maybe bigger kinetic energy risks to the ground, to any obstacles or anybody that they would effectively come down on, I think that FAA is going to slow walk that. If you look at the industry now with passenger airlines, there's technology on those airliners right now to fly them autonomously.
Right.
The fact of the matter is, there's still two pilots sitting in the cockpit, flight deck. So, I don't see, after the investment of hundreds of millions of dollars that the Airbuses and Boeings of the world have made in this technology, and that's been proven now over, say, a couple of decades, I don't know how quickly the regulatory environment's going to allow for fully autonomous, larger vehicle activity. So I think we still have some ways to go there.
Yeah. You think 20 years?
I hate to put numbers. Technology evolves so quickly, and anything can change. Depending on, since FAA is really a system. It's really an organization of humans who have differing opinions and differing different political views come down and legislation comes down. You just can't put a number on these things. The fact of the matter is, looking at it from my perspective, understanding how those people in the agency make their risk determinations, and of course then the liability that goes along with those determinations that they have to make, I don't foresee them, barring any sea change in policy or in legislation or politics, that happens. I'm going to say at least a decade.
I could see that. And you just said on another note that's critical here. The airspace is I think number one. But are you seeing policy progress?
Well, we have seen some progress. We've seen the OOP rules, right? The Operations Over People rules. I think that was a huge step in the right direction, and it shows you where FAA's thought process is going. It's going toward that, type certification, basically manned aviation type of a paradigm, where you're not going to take on the riskiest operations unless you absolutely have, you can prove that you're not going to be a risk. Right. So I think that's really important. It doesn't surprise me that they came back around to that, because what does surprise me is that they fought off the pressure from the industry groups to push them away from that. So it doesn't surprise me, though, from a risk management perspective, that they went that direction. Policy, legislation-wise, there's some legislation pending. It's the Advanced Air Mobility Coordination Act, which it's an effort to bring together the stakeholders in some sort of a forum that is going to drive the industry forward instead of being so fragmented with everybody pulling in different directions. I think that would be a positive. Obviously, the RID rule, if it ever gets implemented in a usable form, I think is going to be excellent for SUAS. Getting those UTM systems eventually developed. I see lots of fantastic technology here, walking around the floor, and if anybody hasn't been here, they should come the next time, because this is a great show. It opened my eyes to a lot of the technology that's out there. Personally, I see, I think you need to tie the actual use cases to the technology now. I think that's going to be great. And if there's some policy or some way that we can connect those, I think that's going to drive the industry forward also.
Absolutely.
So there is some progress. I know it's not as quick as everybody wants. I've heard from talking to people around here that everybody's pulling in different directions.
Yeah.
And I think one of the big focuses that Ultra is going to push is that we should all be collaborating. We should all be working, putting aside some of our individual interests, which we all have individual interests if we have businesses and such, because everybody's trying to be competitive and make money. The fact is, there's got to be some collaboration among all the stakeholders to drive the industry forward, so everybody can kind of grab onto it and move with it.
Absolutely. This keeps coming up. This whole idea of collaboration is critical, because this is a big step change for everybody. When was the last time we saw this kind of mass innovation in transportation? You don't see this often. And a lot of the innovation in this space has been in space, and the average person doesn't have access to that. So,
although it looks like it's going that way.
It sure does. It is going that way. So, from your space of thought and experience, how would you advise private sector UAV companies and AAM companies, infrastructure tech companies to be best prepared for this evolution into the market? Package delivery, cargo delivery with with eVTOLs. How would you advise people to be thinking right now?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because I think it's a difficult road for the smaller players because of the massive amounts of funding that the larger players have. And while you can be nimble and get some stuff done being a smaller player, I think at some point from a package delivery perspective or a mass market perspective, the big players in the world are going to dominate. So if you're trying to, I think as a smaller business or organization trying to find your way, I don't know if head-to-head competition with those people would be the right way to go, but there are going to be niche markets that they're not going to serve, and I think that the smaller players can find those niche markets and make excellent businesses for themselves. Mm-hmm. But I really think with the amount of money that's flying around, you kind of got to stay out of the way of the freight train on these things. That would be my personal view. With the eVTOL players, I see it the same way. I think there's going to be a top 5 or 6 that come out that are well funded because of the costs associated with the certification process. There's a lot of novel designs out there. I'm not sure if FAA is really geared up well enough, has the resources to really understand those novel designs as well easily as they would of something that's more traditional. So I think it's going to drive some of the cost and the length of time that it takes to certify those aircraft. So, there's definitely challenges there. Capitalization is huge because, again, aviation, the amount of money just to certify anything is ridiculous. So that's where I go. Infrastructure-wise, well, we can speak to the SUAS infrastructure for package delivery. We're already seeing warehouses being built out by the big players with drone deployment centers. They're already using them inside their centers. So I think from an infrastructure standpoint, they're going to develop their own. Industrial real estate's been hot for a long time. And now they're just integrating the drone activities into the warehouses. What we're seeing on the eVTOL side, there's definitely, I think we've done some preliminary work in New York with our partners. We're seeing a lack of available hangar space. That's going to be, I think, a big issue. If you look at the existing fleets of rotorcraft, and then you add, even if you were to supplant if some of the existing rotorcraft would come out and some eVTOL would replace, you'd still need to increase your hangar space. You're going to need maintenance operations. You're going to need all the kind of things you need for air operations. So that's, I think, an opportunity for people. Again, industrial real estate. You have placement issues with all those things. So that's been a big problem. And Ultra works pretty heavily in that area, in the New York area. With some of our partners. One of our advisors, as you may know, is the Kearney Heliport, just off the east side of Newark Airport. It's the largest rotorcraft facility I think on the East Coast, if not the country. So we've got some pretty good expertise there. So we're here to help. So if anybody would like to talk about that, give us a shout.
Wow, I mean, these are some of the new opportunities, to your point, that are popping up that didn't exist before, and so it causes some challenges, but it also is a space for opportunity. But this is a part of that infrastructure play that's necessary to make this industry work. And there's so much that will surround this progress. Now, this is a question I ask everybody. This is the last question. What is the biggest challenge that we need to overcome for these new aviation and aerospace initiatives to really become a real possibility in this potentially cluttered airspace?
I can't speak to what the biggest challenge is going to be. I don't have that kind of expertise, but I can tell you that the aerospace integration piece and bringing all these different players, these different aircraft types with different performance characteristics and different needs, and integrating them to busy airspace can be exceptionally difficult. I know there's a couple of the ConOps out there that the FAA has put out, and in my reading of them, it'll work in some places and it won't work in all places. So we're going to have to really dig deep into that. We're going to have to take into account the existing legacy operators, all the community aspects that we're going to have, the environmental impacts, and find some way to bring everybody together harmoniously, not just from a safety and separation standpoint, but again with the communities, and then overlaying a technology that's going to be able to manage all of it. It's exceptionally huge lift, and that's what everybody's here to do. You walk around this place and everybody's out there and trying to bring great products to market or services to market, and we'll get there. It's just going to be a difficult lift.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Ray. These have been your 6 questions on ZeoCast Live. We look forward to talking with you in the future.
Well, thank you, Brahman. I appreciate it.
Thanks.